Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. I'm your host, Omar Zaran. Thank you as always for joining me for another edition of the pod. Been off for a couple weeks here, but I wanted to get into some NFL playoff stuff. As I'm sure most of you know, the Super Bowl has been determined, the players of the Super Bowl have been determined as the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles. It's a rematch of a Super Bowl from a couple years ago, which, ended in a Chiefs victory, was one of the more watched Super Bowls in recent memory. But this time, it feels like the same excitement for that is not as quite the same as it was a couple years ago. And a lot of that is, a lot of people are kind of already over the Chiefs making it, and some people don't really want to see a rematch of Philadelphia and Kansas City. And it's led some people to go out and say, hey, we're not even going to watch this game. What's the point? It's two teams that I don't really care about. And part of that is the anti dynasty sentiment, plus the fact that, Philadelphia is a unique fan base that a lot of people also don't like. So it's turned into this thing where there's like the Chiefs fatigue thing. There's not a great story or storyline that can be followed upon. And as a result, you're seeing a lot of people kind of groan about this matchup. So I kind of want to talk about all those factors and why we're kind of feeling this way about this particular matchup. So first things first, let's talk about Chiefs fatigue. So whenever there's a great team, there becomes a desire to beat that team, right? You want the team to lose because the more that they've won beforehand, the greater the satisfaction it is when they are overthrown, right? You think about the fact that the Bulls in the 90s got through the Detroit Pistons was made a little sweeter because the Pistons had won twice in a row. When LeBron finally beat the Warriors, it was a little bit sweeter because the Warriors had gone on a little bit of a run there, right? And in the NFL, when the Patriots lost to the Giants, it was a big deal because everybody had this assumption that the Patriots are going to win both times that those two teams played in the Super Bowl. So when it comes to the Chiefs now, we're encountering a team that is going for its third in a row. Unprecedented. It's never been done. The Patriots never did it. Montana's 49ers never did it. The Steelers and Cowboys back in the day never did it. It's a big deal, right? Now, that by itself, you would think, would be enough of a storyline to captivate people. Oh, let's see this team go for its third straight. But I think what we have an issue with, or what the Chiefs' issue is here, and they've kind of milked it up and saying, hey, we're underdogs and, nobody wants to see us here and all this, the typical bulletin board material type stuff. But the fact is that we have a little bit of an overexposure situation when it comes to these NFL teams, right? It's not particularly just the Chiefs, but when you win a lot, you're going to have a lot of more of the headlines. So the Chiefs right now are getting all the headlines. Add into the fact that a lot of people are still, for reasons unknown to me, resentful of the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce element, right? And they see Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and all these State Farm commercials in the middle of games. You're seeing this stuff, and then there's the notion, which we're going to get to later, about referees favoring the Chiefs or whatever. So in this social media, always connected, always online age, it's real easy to get bored of something, even though it's only been a few years. Like the Patriots dynasty went many, many years, and it feels like that same animosity towards a team that wins isn't really there as it is right now. And again, you could say it's the way that the Chiefs have won like all year this year. They have gone out of their way to be unimpressive in a win, right? Where Mahomes looks like garbage for three quarters and then makes a play here, play there. all of a sudden they've won a game, and they won 15 games this year. I mean, it's not nothing, right? Not many teams have won 15 games in a season. And then they go into the playoffs, kind of handle Houston, and they have the game this past weekend against Buffalo. And, it's kind of people get bored of things so much quicker now. It's one thing that I think that the NBA has going good for it right now is that they are in a kind of a parity era where in this decade, the 2020s, excuse me, no NBA team has won more than one title. And I think that that's good for the league in the sense that you're always getting new blood, right? Oh, Denver won, then the next year, not so much. Now this year it seems like OKC might win that title. And that's an exciting thing because we're checking in on this stuff daily. And so if you keep on saying this great team over and over and over again, you're going to get bored of it faster. So I think the Chiefs fatigue thing, it's a real thing. And the interesting thing about it is that, after the game on Sunday, Nate Burleson on the CBS post game was kind of trying to say, hey, don't let the narrative of Chiefs fatigue get out of you, get the better of you. We're over here witnessing greatness, and we need to accept this greatness, acknowledge this greatness while it's in front of us. While I think he has a point, I also think that the fatigue thing is a different situation from the fact that the Chiefs are great. I think most people know that the Chiefs are great. I think the issue that a lot of people have is that it's constantly shoved in their face, and there's a perception of refs and all that. And like I'm on threads here and there, and one of the people I follow, KD, she is like a Lions fan, and if you're a Lions fan, you're generally used to misery, right? So to see a team that continually has the domino fall their way has to be infuriating. And then obviously, again, it becomes the ref thing. It becomes the quote NFL wants the Chiefs to win thing, and it just becomes so much to kind of process that you're just hoping beyond hope that this team loses because there's just a desire to see new blood. Like, why can't Josh Allen win one? Why can't Joe Burrow win one, even though he's been to a Super Bowl? Why can't Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson? Why can't these guys win one? Why can't CJ Stroud, Bo Nix, and this next generation of young QBs coming up, why can't they win one in the AFC, right? And that whole dynamic is led into this fatigue. And I think that this whole new blood thing is just something that is the hopes of the whole parity aspect of the NFL. The thing is, like, the NFL will always say parity and every team has a chance and all this stuff. And the last 20 years have really proven that to be incorrect. It's kind of like it's been Brady's NFL for the most part. You have Peyton Manning and Ben Roethlisberger winning some titles, Eli Manning winning some titles. And, with the exception of like an Aaron Rodgers year here or a Drew Brees year there, it's been dominated by a few of these figures. And now we're kind of firmly in the Mahomes era. And I think a lot of people see all the great things that Lamar Jackson can do, the great things that these other players can do. And they say, I really just want to see a new team win. And I think that a lot of that, again, is driven from the fact that we consume NFL content year round. There is no off season. Like on shows like First Take or whatever, they're talking about the NFL in July, because the draft has happened. And then you're thinking about free agency and trades and how this coach is going to do that, how this coach is going to do that, right? It's like all these different things. And so there is no off season for you to think about and kind of take a step back from football. So even when the games aren't being played, you're still thinking about it, right? So that just creates more and more of a desire for something new. Everybody is always kind of chasing what's the next big thing. Like that's just something you hear in all the time, right? Is that, what's the next big thing? Apple is trying to figure out what's their post iPhone strategy, right? And as opposed to just saying, yeah, the iPhone's great, we're going to keep on making money off of it. That's boring to shareholders and investors. They want to know how is the Vision Pro going to change the world, right? What's your next great idea? And the next great idea of the NFL hasn't come out yet because Mahomes and the Chiefs are dominating. And conversely, on the NFC side, Philadelphia has been a fixture now in the the conference championship and Super Bowl contention window. And so you get a rematch from a couple years ago, and people are like, oh, I've already seen this movie. I don't need to see it again. Right. And that becomes, you see it with like stuff like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, where people are so used to these superhero movies, they got a little bit of superhero movie fatigue. So when they came out with movies that maybe weren't as good as like the Avengers movies, they're like, people aren't really feeling it because they've seen it all already, right? And they want something different, something new, something energetic. It's why Black Panther, when it came out, was such a big deal, because the new thing they presented was like, here's like this all black film crew, all black cast, very African, and it really touched the cultural aspect of being black and being black in America and the juxtaposition there. There's like some social commentary, and people love that, right? And not to mention that Chadwick Boseman, may rest in peace, is a tremendous actor in that role. So, what's the solve? I don't think people are really going to get over being bored of the Chiefs. The ultimate thing is you got to have a team beat them. And what kind of goes a little unreported here, and all the like talk about rigging and everything is just preordained for the Chiefs, is that both the Chiefs and the Eagles have two of the best front offices in the NFL. Howie Roseman and Brett Veach are two very high level general managers. They bring in players, right? The Eagles drafted Jalen Carter when everybody thought he was a red flag. They saw something in Jalen Hurts and turned him into, at times, an MVP caliber quarterback, which wasn't this year, but in the past he has been. They bring in a Saquon Barkley. They get a Darius Slay. Right? They draft well. They trade for A.J. Brown. They get aggressive. And you look at the Chiefs, they let people go, and their scouting has just been so good in the Mahomes era. They make a trade with Buffalo to get Xavier Worthy. He scored a touchdown on Sunday. I bet Buffalo's thinking about that today, right? They have a reclamation receiver like Juju Smith-Schuster. Chris Jones, who they paid, is just awesome. And then all these different guys, Karlaftis on the defense, young, active, really good football players, right? And that goes a little underreported. Obviously, you have the great coaching with Andy Reid as well. Everything kind of turns into this whole Mahomes thing, right? Which brings me to the refs. So anybody that knows me knows I will never, ever, 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 unless it's the most extreme circumstance, like last play of the game, terrible call, blame the referees for a loss. And I think that the reason most people do that is that because I wrote about this a while ago, is that referees are the easiest scapegoat ever, right? If you think you got a bad call, and when you're watching a game from a certain lens, whether it's your team, it's your favorite player, you have money on the game, whatever, you're going to look at that from the lens of what is a favorable outcome to you. So if there's a very short or a very close call for a spot, like happened on a 4th and short run for the Bills, you're going to see that with the predetermined bias that you want it to go your way. Same way if you're the Chiefs fan, you're probably saying that wasn't even close. Of course, they made the right call, right? It's easier to do that and say, oh, the refs fucked it up, the refs messed it up, whatever, than to say, hey, my coach called the wrong play, or my franchise quarterback didn't execute, or my receiver dropped a pass, right? It's so much easier to just say, well, the ref screwed us over. So that's the issue that you have with blaming the refs. And a lot, of course, it came out in full force with this Bills game because, again, it was 4th and short on a key drive. They tried this QB sneak that Buffalo loves to run with Josh Allen. Josh Allen, huge guy, right? So he's not going to get low like Jalen Hurts is. He likes to go to the left. Chiefs knew that, and they were able to stop it multiple times throughout the game. So instead of blaming the refs, my thing is, why are you blaming the refs when they're calling this stupid play call that didn't work multiple times and you're just hoping it's going to work this time? They have James Cook, who was getting over 7 yards a carry. And you're trying to tell me that he couldn't have burst one open to get that half a yard that they needed. So it's so much easier to just say the refs this, the refs that, the refs this, the refs that. And to me, it's a little bit lazy commentary, right? because if you're just going to blame the refs for everything, do we not hold our coaches and our players and our front offices accountable for when things happen on the field? And you could easily kind of just say that it's rigged against you or whatever, or you could just admit it's probably a bad play call. McDermott and Joe Brady should have come up with something maybe a little bit more innovative. And a lot of teams have kind of gone to this whole fourth and short, you got to do the QB sneak. It's the whole tush push thing that the Eagles have done. And, this weekend with the goal line stand that we saw in Washington that caused a referee to threaten awarding a touchdown if Washington went offsides for a fourth time. It's just like this play has kind of stifled innovation. I wouldn't be surprised if it was somewhat removed or heavily modified to not be as effective. But like everybody's trying some variation of it, of a tush push or inverted QB sneak or delayed QB draw, whatever. And I just kind of, I personally don't love the play. And when we have a league that's like, oh, we're focused on safety, safety, safety. Player safety is the most important thing. But you're going to allow this play that literally is designed around initiating head-to-head contact because, your offensive linemen are going in, the defensive linemen are going in as well. So they're head-to-head. And then you have collisions waiting to happen with a jumping linebacker and the QB trying to get pushed through. So it kind of is a little bit of a deviation from what the NFL has been, in recent years in terms of rules. Well, let's get into the Bills, though. The Bills are probably one of those franchises that you could argue are cursed, right? Obviously, they had the 4 trips to the Super Bowl in the 90s, lost all 4, which is incredible, right? You get to a Super Bowl 4 times. You would think you would win 1, right? But they didn't. They missed field goals, and it's not like they were blown out in all these games. They were missing field goals. They were tight games. Now they are 0-4, that number 4 kind of creeping up again against this Chiefs team, and they just can't get over the hump. They can't find a way to win these games that, Patrick Mahomes has figured out ways to win every single time that, Tom Brady figured out ways to win. Peyton Manning would figure out ways to win, right? And I think that the Bills are so shell-shocked from these Chief games. It's almost like they expect something bad to happen, like the 13-second game. You score, there's 13 seconds on the clock. You're supposed to have done your job right. Just kidding. It's just like they changed the overtime rules for the Bills, because of the way they lost in the playoff game to the Chiefs when they didn't get a chance to get the ball, right? And it's just like, it's just misfortune after misfortune. But I wouldn't go as far to say they're cursed, right? Like Peyton Manning lost a lot of games before he started winning in the playoffs. It's not, I think the problem here is that Patrick Mahomes has kind of wrecked the grading curve for a lot of these other QBs because typically you lose a lot, before you start winning in a crazy, crazy amount of games. Brady, of course, is the exception there, but like, everybody's like saying, oh man, is Lamar Jackson a choke artist? Can Josh Allen ever win the big one? Like these guys aren't even 30 yet, and it's just like, what we see what Mahomes has done, we said that's the standard, that's what you need to be. And I think when you look at Buffalo, this year was kind of supposed to be a little bit of a step back. They let Stephon Diggs go. They didn't really have a big name receiver. They bring in Amari Cooper in the middle of the season. They're relying on Keon Coleman, the rookie, Mac Hollins, another nice low player, but and James Cook has kind of elevated into being a elite level running back. But going into the season, no one expected that. So, it's almost like them getting to the conference championship game, winning the division. That's still a good season. So I don't think they'll be getting rid of McDermott or make any sort of sweeping change. You still have Josh Allen in his prime, and when you have the QB, a lot of other stuff tends to happen. So they just have to figure out ways, right? They got to figure out a way they just got to play smarter, man. Like that's the issue is that Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, they're going to scheme it up and they're going to put their guys in positions to make plays when your team isn't ready for it, right? We saw it on that last fourth down. They weren't ready for the exotic corner blitz that Spagnuolo threw at them, and they got burned, right? They threw one up Kincaid had a little bit of a chance to get it, didn't get it, and Chiefs again make a winning play. But I kind of want to get into the whole storyline thing. I caught a TikTok clip from author Jeff Pearlman, who's one of my favorite sports authors, and he was saying how the Super Bowl doesn't really have an interesting storyline. How you would have teams in the past that make the Super Bowl, and it's really interesting that they're there. And he had a couple examples like the Chargers the first time they went, or when Marino went to his first Super Bowl. All you're really getting here, according to Jeff, is a rematch of a couple years ago. And I think when the point he is making is when you compare it to what it could have been. So in the AFC, you could have had Baltimore. So that would have been Lamar Jackson's first Super Bowl, which would be an opportunity for him to get over the hump, for him to win his first Super Bowl, to get, to show, that he's a force to be reckoned with in comparison to Mahomes. So that's one. It could have been Buffalo, which is first time for them going to back to the Super Bowl since the 90s, beating the Chiefs to get there. Josh Allen's ascendancy moment. Then you kind of go over into the NFC. So you get the Eagles. Now, you could have had the Commanders, which would have been the Cinderella stories of all Cinderella stories. This team was the worst run franchise in the league until they get new owners. They draft a rookie QB. He's sensational. And that would have been obviously a fun storyline to talk about for 2 weeks. The Detroit Lions are the other option, right? You have a team that could have been a team of destiny of some sorts. This would be the Lions' first Super Bowl appearance. They sustained a million injuries on defense, and were able to overcome it all, right, and make the Super Bowl. Jared Goff gets a chance to rewrite his history as a player who lost in a Super Bowl previously. Even the Rams, like Sean McVay getting back to the mountaintop with Matthew Stafford. All these young defensive players that weren't there for the first run, get a chance to, show something to the world when, they were a team that was written off after starting 1-3 or 1-4. But instead we get the Eagles and Chiefs. So what is the appeal for the Chiefs? The Chiefs, obviously, it's a three-peat, right? So anything with the Chiefs is going to be centered around Bill Belichick and Tom Brady and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes catching up to them. So, if you get the three-peat, Mahomes' greatest quarterback ever conversations kind of get ignited. You get Andy Reid better than Belichick conversations to get ignited. The Eagles, I think the main one is, it would be the validation of Nick Sirianni as a good coach in this league, because despite winning a bunch of games, he is not viewed that way by his own fan base. The other one would be the great redemption of Saquon Barkley, right? Guy who was drafted number 2 overall, wallowed with a lot of losing teams with the Giants. Everybody kind of, he was written off multiple times because of injuries. He almost sets the single season yardage record for a running back. And now he goes ahead and wins a Super Bowl, right? That's the appeal. But the issue is those two appeals between Philly and KC aren't as strong as, say, if it was Detroit and Buffalo. Two downtrodden franchises, 2 quarterbacks looking for their first Super Bowl, 2 coaches looking for their first Super Bowl, 2 guys who aren't your conventional, type of head coaches, and 2 cities that hadn't experienced, high level success like this in a long time. And that would have been fascinating. For the Rams to win the Super Bowl playing against whoever, then you could have also argued that, hey, this with the LA fires and everything going on, this was like, a special victory for this franchise. You could have had Baltimore and Detroit, 2 of the blackest cities in America, in New Orleans, right? That's, culturally speaking, that would have been incredibly significant, as like 2 predominantly black cities in a very predominantly black hosting city, and getting to, play for all the glory, so to speak, right? there's a lot of those storylines, and I think we love storylines more than we kind of admit. We want the good story, and at a certain point, a team just exerting its dominance maybe isn't that, right? And then you also like with the Chiefs specifically, you kind of there is a little bit of the political element here, because no two ways about it. There have been players on the Chiefs that have leaned one way or the other. So you have Travis Kelsey, who's dating Taylor Swift, who of course is incredibly left leaning, and Travis himself is very left leaning as well. And then you have Harrison Butker, who's on the opposite side, very right wing, very conservative. Patrick Mahomes and his wife Brittany, also pretty conservative, even though they try to keep a little bit more of a milk toast public image. They grew up in Texas, good chance that you're probably a little bit more on the conservative side. So there's those things at play that a lot of people might not like as much. So it kind of fuels into the hatred. But to kind of wrap this all up, I want to talk now about, a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not going to watch the Super Bowl. And I'm sorry, I have to call you guys out on this. You are going to watch the Super Bowl. If nothing else, you're going to hate watch it, right? Everybody's like, oh, I'm not going to waste my time, blah, blah, blah. You'll probably tune in, if not for the Kendrick Lamar halftime show, just to see like new commercials or something. There's going to be something about it that draws you in. Because ultimately, we're going to hate watch this, right? For me, my intrigue is that I'd like to see Saquon Barkley win the title. I've been a Giants fan for most of my life, and he's really a player that I have profound respect for. And even though it's a division rival of the Giants, I don't care about that as much as other Giants fans do. Like, I don't have this built-in resentment of the Eagles, because when they've been pretty good, we kind of sucked, right? So I'd love to see Saquon win a title. Also, I mean, if the Chiefs end up winning this game, pretty cool to see history, right? Never had a three-peat in the NFL. That would be pretty cool to see, even if people hate the Chiefs. But because you hate the Chiefs, you're probably going to watch, right? You're going to be locked in because you want to yell at your TV every time Taylor Swift's on the screen, or you want to, see or be validated in your opinion that the refs are, pro Chiefs or the league is pro Chiefs. And so, is it the most exciting Super Bowl matchup of all time? No. Like, there's games within the game, right, that are pretty exciting. Like, for example, the Chiefs offensive line, how are they going to hold up against this interior rush from like Jalen Carter and these other guys on the Eagles that are going to get pressure? And how are they going to call the run game? Kareem Hunt's been okay. Pacheco has been okay. The Eagles' run defense has been incredible, right? Conversely, how are the Chiefs going to try and stop Saquon Barkley, who's just been on a tear this postseason? Is it going to open up some avenues for Devontae Smith and AJ Brown? Conversely, the Chiefs have a pretty decent young secondary, but they're not super experienced, right? So do you try and take advantage of that? I think Dallas Goedert might have himself a nice game. He's been pretty open throughout the playoffs. So there's like little things like that. There's also the Andy Reid corollary, right? But we've already seen it before, so it's not as big of a deal. Playing against his former team that, he got to a Super Bowl with before but never won. And again, can Sirianni get revenge? There's some stuff here. But I think the possibility of like a Detroit Buffalo or Detroit Baltimore was just so appetizing to people. And not getting it is kind of like a gut punch, right? But I wouldn't blame. I think that's just kind of circumstantial, and the society that we live in today of instant gratification and wanting something new all the time, right? Like, you think phone companies make a new phone every year, right? It's because we want something new. That's just kind of who we are as a society. But I think I wouldn't dismiss this Super Bowl as being too boring. I think it could be a good game. The Eagles and Chiefs, whenever they play each other tight. I still think it's hard to go against Mahomes. But man, I'd love to see Saquon Barkley win one, So Curious what your guys' thoughts are, who you like in the Super Bowl, if you're excited for it, or if you, like a lot of other people online, are going to be deciding to boycott the game for whatever reason. That's going to wrap up another edition of the podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. You can make sure to check out the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Till next time, I'm your host, Omar Zaran, Deep Cover Podcast. We'll see you later.